Hey guys, in this video I want to talk about the 10 things to consider before entering the studio for your first drum recording. I've been working as a sound engineer for around 10 years and I've encountered some of the mistakes that drummers make before going into the studio. So I want you to avoid those mistakes. Number 1, bring more than one pair of sticks. This has happened to me a few times when a drummer comes into the studio on the weekend and he has a full album or an EP or a few songs to record and he has only one pair of sticks. And of course it's Saturday or Sunday and the music shop doesn't work. So basically I would end up lending my own sticks, which then would be broken and then would be added to the bill of the client. So this is number 1. Bring more than a pair of sticks. Bring 3, bring 5. Whatever is enough for you to finish the recording and still have at least a pair of sticks. Number 2. Make sure that if you're bringing your own kit to the studio, that the skins are relatively new. Now, I don't say brand new. They don't have to be brand new. They can be played on once or twice or maybe even 3 times. But they need to be in good condition and make sure they don't have the moon craters, the holes in them. So make sure that they're relatively new. They will sound better and they will hold the tuning better as well. Number 3, eliminate any squeaking from your pedal. This is a common problem that over time the pedals, they make these squeaking sounds, which then can be picked up by the kick-in mic very easily. So you need to be sure that you've eliminated all the squeaks so you have a clean recording. Some people fight it with WD-40. Now, I do not recommend using the WD-40. What I use is kind of a special brand of bicycle chain oil, which works very well. So make sure you eliminate those squeaks before you enter the studio just to save yours and the engineer's time. Number 4, bring good quality cymbals. Now, if you have a entry-level set, like the, PST 3 or some cheap Zildjians, it tends to be that the more expensive cymbals actually sound really a lot better and it'll make you sound that much better. So if you have a friend who has more expensive cymbals or you can lend some from a company, do so. Only if you're on a really tight budget, then I'd say, I'm not saying it's impossible to record with cheap cymbals, but if you can get some more expensive ones, it'll make you sound better. And the more expensive cymbals tend to be easier to mix because they don't have those kind of unnecessary harsh frequencies that after you've recorded, the sound engineer has to cut out, and it takes a longer time to mix and eventually it sounds worse than it would sound with a really good set of cymbals. Number 5, have your songs tempo mapped. This is a more technical thing, but if you're familiar with Cubase or Reaper or any sort of DAW, you can always tempo map your songs, which will make your life and your engineer's life a bit easier because then he can import the MIDI, including the tempo, to the project, and you'll have all the structure of your song in just a simple MIDI file, which will then be connected to the click in Cubase or any DAW, and it'll make your life easier. Now, if you have songs that don't have any changes in tempo, then it's much easier. Then you just have to know the tempo. So meaning you have to figure out the tempo of your songs before you enter the studio, so you don't have to do that in the studio, because then it'll take time and it'll take time from you and your engineer to figure those tempos out. So make sure you do your homework and figure out your tempos, and if there are some tempo changes, do tempo map your songs. Now, if you're not familiar with tempo mapping, you can always at least figure out the tempos of each part that you're recording, and then you can tell the engineer that this is going to be 180, this is going to be 120, and so on. Number 6, have a demo of your songs. This is a relatively easy thing to do because you can do it either with a phone or a handheld recorder, or if you have a simple interface, just putting a mic in the studio when you're recording. So the engineer has some idea what sound it is that you're going for. Now this correlates to another thing I'm going to say, but we'll get to that a bit later. So have a demo of your songs. If, for example, if you're like me and you like doing demos before you enter the studio, which means what I do is I would program my drum parts in Reaper or Cubase. The guitar players do their parts at home. So before we enter the studio, we already have a full song written down and recorded. It's just a demo version of the song, but then the producer or the engineer knows the kind of sound that we want to achieve in the song. So this is a thing that's not also useful for the drummer, but for the whole band in general. So if you're able, do a full demo with each instrument, programmed drums, recorded guitars, vocals. And if you don't have these kind of possibilities, then you can just put a mic in the middle of the room, or just a phone that's not gonna distort the sound too much, and record that. But that'll still give the engineer a kind of an idea of what it is that you're going for. Number 7, have backing tracks. In my early days as a sound engineer, what I would do is I would always ask the drummer to bring a guitar player along so that he has a kind of a backing track. So basically the guitar player would come in and he would play live with the drummer so that he doesn't get lost, and it would add a bit to the feel of the song. So he would not just be performing with a click, but he would actually hear the guitar player playing with him, so that would add a bit of emotion in his playing. Now, these days, I would just say, have your guitar player record his parts, or both guitar players if there are two, or even the full band can have a demo, which is tempo locked with a click, and then you can play to that. So have some kind of a backing track that'll help you with the emotion and with timing as well. And this way, the guitar player doesn't have to come with you to the studio and play along with you, because you already have the tracks. Number 8, tune your kit after each song. This is especially for the more hard-hitting drummers, but in general, it's a good idea to have, if you're recording an album or a few songs, to check the tuning of your drum kit, because you'll be hitting it hard and it tends to go out of tune. You don't want to get like a higher snare drum in one song and then it suddenly goes lower in another song. Sometimes this happens even in the middle of the song. So, for example, when we recorded our last album, sometimes we would even tune the snare and the toms during the song, because we would know that there's going to be a pause in the song, so we would stop recording at that time, and then we would check the tuning of the drum kit, especially the snare and the toms, because you don't want to have a snare which is higher in tune in the beginning of the song and then suddenly lower in the end of the song, because it makes mixing a whole lot more challenging. Number 9, be open to new ideas. This is a very important thing. And these days, the budget of recordings has gone down, way down. So in most cases, what tends to happen is the sound engineer, the recording engineer, has the role of the producer as well. In the old days, it used to be there was a engineer, there was a producer, and they would do different things. Now, it's both the engineer and the producer in one. And it's your job as a drummer to be open and don't have a big ego. Because sometimes when you enter the studio, you have certain parts written for your song. But there's always the possibility of the engineer asking you to maybe play something different. And you need to be open to these ideas, because that way it can actually make your recording that much better. Some small changes, but they actually add a lot. So at least be open to trying these out, and don't be limited to just the things that you wrote, and don't think of them as the best version of the song that it can be, because actually it may change in the studio. So be open to that, be prepared to have some new ideas come in from the engineer and producer, and be open. And number 10, don't have the mindset that the producer is going to fix your recording in post-production, in mixing. Now, I'm guilty of this as well. I've come into the studio to another engineer, and I completely sucked. And, well, it did not feel good. And, well, what he did was he fixed it in post-production, and it killed a lot of the liveliness and a lot of the musical element in the recording. So what I encourage you to do is practice and come into the studio ready at 110%. So the engineer doesn't have to edit your song or replace your faulty playing with samples. Because if you want an on the grid perfect recording, you can just program your drums and be okay with it. If you're going to the studio to record, it doesn't mean it has to be perfect, but it has to be alive, and you have to deliver. So be ready for the studio, and don't think that they're gonna fix it in post-production. They always can, but then why record? So those were my 10 things to consider before entering the studio. See you later.